Welcome to the Filipino American Women Project, a podcast show that shares stories and life lessons told by individuals living or have lived in America that are of Filipino descent and identify as female. I'm your host, Jen Amos, a fellow Filipino American woman, and I'm excited for you to join us. Let's get started. All right. Hi, everyone. Jen Amos here with the Filipino American Women Project podcast show. And as always, I have my incredible co-host with me, Nani Dominguez. Nani, welcome back to the show.
Hello, hello.
Awesome. And we are excited because, come on, every time we do another show, it means that we get to interview another incredible person in our Filipino community. So I want to introduce you all to Meia Santos. Meia is born and raised in Chicago, multitasking at her best by balancing work, school, and raising her 2-year-old son with her fiancé. When she has free time, her and her little family love to travel, cook, and dance. She also has a food blog on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter called Food Raised Me to share her love of eating and cooking. Meia, welcome to the show.
Hi, you guys.
It's great to have you. And yeah. I was saying this offline, but I feel compelled to saying this. But it's not really that big of a deal, honestly. But the cool thing is that we're all calling in different time zones right now. So we have the Eastern time. We have, what do you call your time, Meia? Is it Mountain time?
Central.
Okay, Central. I feel like I should have known that. So Central time. And then we have Nani in Pacific time. So look at that. That is cool.
Yes.
Yeah. So speaking of which, considering how we're all calling in different places, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the project. And Meia, let's have you start off by sharing, how did you hear about the Filipino American Women Project and what inspired you to be on our show today?
I actually came across the Filipino American Women Project through Instagram during Filipino American History Month. I kind of was just on my Food Raised Me and just adding, a whole bunch of people and came across you guys and listened to the podcast. And I thought it was just great. Growing up, it was just me and my mom. There wasn't a lot of Filipino aunties I would have loved to chismis with and all that. So I'm always trying to connect with other Filipinos, and to hear other Filipinos and their stories is just amazing. How could I not want to be a part of that?
Oh, I love it. Yeah, I think that when people share their story on the show, it kind of causes this, whether you call it a domino effect or ripple effect, other women feel compelled to sharing their story as well. It's if she can do it and they can do it, then I can do it, And so it's just really cool that you found us during Filipino American History Month. I feel like that's kind of when I feel like the show is really kicking, not kicking. I feel like the show is really starting to, I don't know, what's the word, Nani? Really start to get a stride in terms of exposure
traction.
And stuff. Traction. Thank you. Yeah. Because I feel like our listenership had increased really during Filipino American History Month. And obviously, why wouldn't it? Because I'm sure that's the time when people are oh, I should probably learn about my culture. And,
and the visionaries.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, exactly. And it was about Pinay visionaries. And I think a lot of people were kind of, looking for more Filipino stories. And so I feel like we really started the show at the right time and really hit our stride during that month. So I'm glad that you are one of the people that found us during that time, Meia.
I'm glad too. I always wanted to share my story, but just didn't know how to go about it, or kind of felt insecure. But I'm if it can help one person, then why not? Everyone has a story to tell.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like how you said, the word insecure. I think that when anyone feels insecure or maybe unsure if their story matters or whatever, I think that's the best time. That's when you know that your story needs to be shared, because that's a story that people need to hear. So speaking of which, this show is dedicated to individuals who live or have lived in America that are of Filipino descent and identify as female or pronouns her and she. So Meia, I'd love for you to share a little bit about your family background. I know offline, you mentioned your relationship with your mother, which I'm sure we'll get into in this conversation. But yeah, I'd love to hear a little bit about your family background and why you identify as a Filipino American woman.
So my mom is Filipino and my father is Black African American. I never knew my father, but just Polaroid pictures growing up, I see a picture of me sitting on this guy's lap that says like me and my dad at 2 years old. But other than that, my mom won't tell me anymore. She says that I didn't have a father. She can never give me a straight story. So that was a little weird. Why can't she just tell me the story? And not only that, but she was very strict in me growing up as far as like when I'm at home, I could only speak Tagalog. That's it. If I spoke English, she would be like, what? I don't understand you, or give me the silent treatment. All my babysitters were Filipino, so I couldn't get away from like the culture, the Tagalog language that way. And so even though she worked, which seemed like 24/7 as a single mom, she made sure to like find resources to kind of teach me more about like the Filipino culture and keep it alive in me.
Yeah, it sounds like, I mean, whether it was in the healthiest way or not, you know, she said like, oh, it's like, you're speaking to me in English. I don't know what you're saying. Like, who are you talking to? You know, and it's like, she'd only respond when you speak in Tagalog. And then like you mentioned with your babysitters, they were all Filipino and spoke to you in Tagalog. I'm kind of curious because, I mean, personally, I don't know Tagalog, but I feel like if I was in that position, I feel like I would have like a complicated relationship with Tagalog. Do you feel that way?
No, it was more or less weird. Like in high school, the Filipino people didn't really accept me because I was like half black. But then I'm like, but half of you guys don't even know Tagalog and I know Tagalog. So, you know, it shouldn't be like a race or competition, but it's kind of like, well, what makes you more Filipino than me or not, you know? So I didn't really have like a battle with it. Now it's just a battle of like, I have no one to talk to. So I'm kind of slowly forgetting it. And then like teaching my son, I'm like, oh, dang, what's that word? Like, so then I kind of speak like Tagalog English or however you would say that, Tagalog English to him. Yeah. And I'm just like, maybe I need to like buy the Filipino cable or something to like keep it going. Or I try to like find YouTube Filipino cartoons for him to listen to or stuff like that. Cause I'm like, I'm slowly starting to forget, which I'm kind of sad about. Cause I'm like, now I see why my mom was so hard on me. And then actually one of my schoolmates, because he asked me, he's like, are you fluent? I'm like, yeah. And he was like, well, nobody really cares about that anymore. And I'm like, for real? Like, I didn't know how to take that. I was kind of just like, are Filipinos kind of trying to be like more American and forget about their culture? Or have they just like given up on like trying to teach their kids like the culture?
When I was living in, or when I was raised in SoCal, Southern California, because we live so close to the border, it was more about learning Spanish than it was about learning Tagalog. So I'm wondering if, you know, it could just be an American thing, or it could be like in the environment that you're living in, you know, in regards to like which language is more important, like above the other. I heard Nani kind of agreeing a little bit. Nani, did you have some thoughts you wanted to share?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's part of a larger conversation as to why, you know, language as a part of our, you know, in the context of our culture has been erased, you know, slowly, little by little over the years. And it speaks to that directly, because we're kind of the generation where that line is being drawn. You know, for my family, anyone from my dad's generation and down doesn't speak Tagalog, but everybody from my grandma's brothers and sisters did. And so that's kind of the hard line where it stopped and it wasn't passed down. And was that intentional? In our case, it absolutely was. And when you say, are Filipino, like, what's going on? Are we intentionally trying to forget our culture? Are we trying to be more American? And again, it's part of that larger conversation of, you know, the need to assimilate into America for the older generations, in my family at least. And that is kind of the direct answer, at least in my case, to that question, is it was absolutely intentional, which, you know, it sucks for me and my kids, because I would like to have that. I would have loved to have held on to that, but you know, I didn't get to make that choice. So here I am. I don't speak the language. And if I do want to learn, I have to go out of my way. And, you know, like you said, if you don't get to have anyone to speak it with, and it's hard to keep it fresh and, use it essentially. So that's also a challenge when nobody else that's in your kind of circle that you talk to on a regular basis, that you can practice with. So yeah, it's tough.
Yeah. And not only that, I'm like, where are all the Lolas at? I'm like, growing up, it seems so easy for my mom to find like Filipino babysitters. And then for my son, I'm like, I have nobody to bring you to. Like right now, his babysitter is like Dominican. So, and she just speaks straight up Spanish. So I'm like, he's definitely going to pick up on Spanish first before Tagalog.
Which is not a bad thing. It's also
that's not a bad thing. I'm like, I'm glad to learn another language. I tried, learning Spanish, high school, college. It just wouldn't stick. I think it's just too close to Tagalog for me to pick up.
Yeah.
But I'm like, as long as he learns another language, that's great. But I'm just like, come on, like, where's everybody at?
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. And like I said, with my family, it kind of all stopped with my grandma's generation, and everybody else is very, intentionally Americanized. That was their wishes,
Right.
Yeah, my relationship with language is associated with my family. And I had mentioned this in past episodes, but I had a pretty toxic, unhealthy, abusive relationship with my family. And to me, learning Tagalog would mean that I'm allowing myself to be in an unhealthy environment. And so it's interesting because, like, if you were to ask me, are you interested in learning Tagalog now? I actually don't know how to answer that. Like, I probably shouldn't have brought that question. Now people are going to ask me that question. But but it's like, it's interesting because it's like I never needed it to survive, at least like in my adult life. And then because of my relationship with my family, I wanted to disconnect from them in that, I didn't want to relate to them essentially. And so that's why I deliberately didn't want to learn, even though my mom told me when I was younger, I could speak it fluently. So yeah, I think just like what Nani said, it's part of like a bigger question, in regards to like the Filipino American community as a whole and how, they look at learning or speaking Tagalog. And so I just think it's so cool that you understand why your mom really pressed upon you to learn or to preserve the language.
Right.
All right. Jen Amos here, jumping into the middle of our show, as I always do, to remind you why this show is possible. So, at the end of every episode, I tend to say, if you didn't catch our guest contact info, don't worry, we'll have those in the show notes. Check them out. I worked so hard on them. You're welcome. Well, it's been brought to my attention that our show notes are not as easy to find as I thought, which is why starting summer 2020, the Filipino American Women Project is proud to be partnering with Captivate, the world's only growth-oriented podcast host. Captivate is created for independent podcasters, designed from day one to help you to focus on audience growth and the expansion of your audio influence. One way that Captivate makes our lives easier as independent podcasters is by taking the guesswork out of making a website for your show. That's right, a website for your show. So listeners, starting summer 2020, finding our show notes will be so much easier. All thanks to Captivate. You're welcome, as always. If you're about to start podcasting or are getting burnt out from all the extra work of producing one, like building a website, consider a 7-day free trial, that's right, free, with Captivate by visiting thefil-am-woman.com. That's the Fil-Am, short for Filipino American Woman.com. Or, check out our show notes in the meantime, which is in the details section of each episode. Once again, you can visit thefil-am-woman.com or visit the details section of this episode. Well, very cool.
Well, I can just add something. I was just going to tie in the fact that how you said now you see kind of why your mom was so adamant and so strict with you, only speaking Tagalog in the house and things like that when you were younger. Now that you have your own son, you're, I'm sure now trying to find creative ways to connect him with his culture, just like she did for you, just maybe, in a different way or in different ways. So that's also something that you're probably thinking about.
Yeah, I really didn't think about it until I had my son. Then it was just like, no, I want you to know your culture. I want you to know who you are. But back then it was just more or less like, great, I can speak another language. So in the case that I need to kind of like code what I'm saying, I have another language to do that by. But other than that, or then like my mom
didn't
was
mean much. Yeah.
Right. Or she would be like, well, if you ever go to the Philippines, like you won't get snatched up as easy because you know Tagalog. And I'm like, okay, I don't know what that means, but okay. I'm like, I think they're still going to know I'm American. I don't have that, Tagalog Filipino accent like I grew up in the Philippines, but okay.
Yeah. Like they could probably tell real quick.
Right.
But you still have an advantage. I see what she was saying.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, no, I would definitely be immediately spotted as an American if I go to the Philippines because I can't. There's like no way I could like blend in, because I wasn't raised in the Philippines in any way. And like the only way I got exposure of the culture was really through my mom and my mom actually. And that was kind of it for me, I think. Meia, have you visited the Philippines or do you visit often?
No, I've never been. Me and my family do plan on going in October next year. So hopefully that goes through. I was supposed to go on my 30th birthday, but then I got pregnant. So that kind of put the pause on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you got to bring your son too.
Yes, exactly. But I'm just like seeing like just pictures and how beautiful it is. I'm like, I don't know. Maybe I wouldn't want to leave.
Yeah. It's different lifestyle out there.
Right.
I think it's interesting. I find it very common, at least on this show, that when Filipino American women or Pinays become mothers, that's when they seem to care more about preserving their culture. So that makes me wonder, even for myself, like if and when I do become a mother, if I'm going to feel that way as well. And yeah, that's just an observation I wanted to make. But that is quite interesting. It sounds like preserving your language was already very important to you, or, remembering Tagalog and speaking it. But do you feel like there was more of a responsibility, like once you had your son?
Not necessarily responsibility. I think it was just more or less just seeing a lot more people not growing up with their culture or not really knowing much about their culture, or even just to the simple fact that a lot of the Filipinos I know don't even like Filipino food or are grossed out by some of the dishes we have, like dinuguan and stuff like that. And I'm just like, I just want him to be proud of who he is and where he came from. I mean, of course, it's up to him when he grows up if he wants to, identify more or less, because my son is Black, Filipino, Mexican, and Chinese. Because I know growing up, I struggled with my identity. And sad to say, but being two more races, I had to kind of pick and choose depending on what it was and what race I wanted to pick, especially back then, because you didn't really have the choice of checking off the box of two or more races and stuff like that. And you had to kind of pick one. And it's like, but I'm both, now I'm forced to pick one.
I still find that fascinating that in our school system, it's important to check off those boxes. Now, I'm not in the educational system in any way, so someone's probably like mad at me right now talking about this. But I imagine that, the whole intent of checking off those boxes is to see like what the greater need is for a certain, demographic. But it almost like backfires because it makes you question your identity. Like even someone such as myself that is considered full Filipino, like I'm kind of like, okay, am I Pacific Islander or am I Asian? Like which one is that?
Exactly. Yeah, I never understood that either because I was like, well, the Philippines is on the Pacific Ocean, and we're an island, so aren't we Pacific Islanders? Like, I always had the debate with friends, and they're like, no, you're Asian. I'm like, but Asia's so far away from our island. Like, if you look on the map, we're all the way, all alone. And not really surrounded by any other like Asian countries. So I'm like, which one do you check off? Or like, what do I say? Do I say I'm Asian? Do I say, and then like a lot of people too, I've heard when it's stuff like, oh, Filipinos aren't real Asians, and I'm like, then what are we? So just hearing stuff like that too, it gets very confusing. Yeah,
absolutely. I just feel like it's this ongoing conversation of what are we? No, really, what are we really? And one thing I'm finding in interviewing our guest is just learning that at the end of the day, like you define who you are and you identify the way that you want to identify. Like I know with Nani, she's mentioned this multiple times throughout the show, even though she's half Russian, she identifies more with her Filipino identity because she was mainly raised in that environment. So am I saying that right, Nani?
Yes. Yes.
Cool,
That's
cool.
a good summary.
Yes. Okay, cool. Yes. So obviously we're not going to have the answers today, right? But I think it's a great conversation to have and always a reminder that it's confusing to be in our situation as individuals of Filipino descent. It's also an invitation for us to open the dialogue and continue to show up as we are and expanding people's worldview of us, by telling our story and challenging people really, just like what you do, Meia, and asking people, well, why don't you want to speak Tagalog? Like, I think that's a question worth asking because it'll make people uncomfortable, but I think it wakes people up too. It's a good reminder of like, okay, like, why do I not want to know? Like, why do I want to be more American than Filipino? Like, what is that? And I think nowadays it's a conversation that's more welcomed. And if not, then wake up, wake up, everyone. It's happening. Like you're getting asked anyway. So you might as well embrace it. You
might as well think about it. Yeah.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly. Well, beautiful ladies. All right. Well, thank you so much for delving deep into that, Meia, with us. Let's go ahead and fast forward to today. For people that are getting to know you for the first time, why don't you share with us a snapshot of your life, particularly what keeps you busy and most excited about life nowadays?
What keeps me busy now is definitely my son. He is always on the go. And I'm like, where do you get all that energy from? Can you share that energy with me? Because I need it. I'm like, well, sometimes right now, just trying to balance like work and then school and then having days pass by where I don't even get to see him, or I'm just like asking my fiancé, like, send me pictures or video, please. Like, but I know in the end, I'll just be worth it and just have to struggle a little bit right now. Try to fit in at as many date nights as we can, or Sunday is usually our family days. So just trying to handle everything at once. I'm like, I'm so happy Christmas break is here so I can relax a little bit. But then I'm like, 2 more years. What did I do? What did I get myself into? This better be worth it. So yeah, no, I go back and forth with that. I'm just like, what did I do? It seemed like a good idea signing up. And I felt like, did I forget that I had a kid now to balance all this with? But it'll just pay off. And not only that, I want him to see and learn that his mom is a hard worker. And even if I had to sacrifice like stuff, like not seeing him, that I'm doing all this for him. And hopefully when he grows up, he'll adapt that hardworking, self in himself too.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like no matter like what a parent does, and I just think about this in my relationship with my mom, is like at one point they're going to have a phase where they're just not going to like you. And you're just going to have to push through it. And then eventually, like, I think in like their 20s, like later 20s, like what happened to me at least, they start to like realize like all the sacrifices, their parents have made. And, like me today, I have a pretty good relationship with my mom now. So I think you're setting a good example for your son. I think it's different for everyone. Like, obviously there's different schools of thoughts when it comes to raising kids, and I'm not even going to like attempt to give my opinion too much because I'm not a parent, so I don't want anyone to attack me or yell at me or leave a bad review. But no, I think there's different schools of thought, and I think like the intent of just the fact that you want to be a good example for your son and you want to provide, and also like you want to put yourself first too. I mean, you're going to school to better yourself, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. So I think what you're doing is great, and the intent is good. And we can only hope in the long run that your son will appreciate it. And like, he's young anyway. He's not going to remember the first couple of years of his life, I think. So it's all good. Better do it now than later.
Right, exactly. Because I'm the same thing as you. Like, I didn't realize what my mom was like going through as a single parent. So all I knew was like, okay, I'm getting dumped at the babysitters again, to a point where I even started calling the babysitters mom because I saw them more than I saw her. And not only that, she was very strict. So it was like when I'm with her, I couldn't really do much anyway. But now I'm like, with the son, I'm like, I don't know if I could have done this by myself like she did. Like, that was crazy. So I'm very thankful, one, that, you know, I have a great fiance who's a great father, and two, that I have that trait of hers. If I was to get any trait of hers, I'm glad that I got, like, her independence and her hardworking and just not wanting to depend on anybody for anything. And if you want something, you go get it yourself.
Right. That's awesome. Nani, I heard you agreeing there in the background. Did you want to add anything?
Yeah, no, I mean, that just reminds me also of my relationship with my mom. I feel like she has just supported me and, you know, similarly. So I'm just nodding along here.
Yay, moms. Yay, moms.
Yes.
May we be like our moms one day.
Yes.
Yeah, I just think to myself, you know, after realizing how selfish I was with the way that I treated her at a certain time in my life, you know, you got to think, you know, my mom, she was an immigrant. She left the Philippines to follow my dad because he joined the Navy. And then we lost my father my dad when back in 98, about 20 years ago. And she had to raise 3 kids, like under 11 years old. And then she dealt with discrimination in the workforce for a very long time just to provide for us. And then here I was giving her a hard time that she wasn't giving me emotional support. And so later in life, when I realized that, I was like, oh man, I was such an awful daughter. But the beautiful thing about my mom is that she held on to her faith so tightly. Like, she's just a solid woman of faith, and she prays every day, and she's just always grateful. And, you know, now that, you know, she's been an empty nester for, like, you know, for years now, but, like, I feel like she's entered this new season in her life where she just feels blessed all the time, so much that she has to, like, show off her life on Facebook and be like, I'm so blessed. I'm so blessed. You know, like, she's always saying blessed. Like, I'm pretty sure she says it like every post. I haven't checked lately, but I'm pretty sure. And, and you know what? That's cool. You know, that's so cool, because I just think of, like, all the things that I put her through. And I'm just like, I can only imagine, like, just the strength a mother has to be so forgiving of their children.
Right.
Because that's a big heart. You got to have a big heart to forgive your kids for putting you what they put you through. I think so. Anyway, to mothers.
Yes. Cheers.
Yes. Just pretend we have drinks and we're doing cheers right now.
Right.
Hey everyone, Jen Amos here, taking a quick break in between our interviews, as I always do, to actually talk about a new resource that I have personally been using for a couple of weeks now called 7 Cups. I want to give a shout out to Asia Hilario, who shared this resource in episode 29. So check it out. We live in a world where you can be surrounded by people, but still feel lonely, with nobody to turn to when things get rough. But being heard is an important part of being human. Psychologist Glenn Mariotti, I think that's how you pronounce his last name, saw that there was great power in listening, but he knew not everyone had someone to talk to. He started to wonder, how can I make being heard a reality for everyone? And that's why 7 Cups was born. Thanks to thousands of volunteer listeners, including myself, stepping up to lend a friendly ear, 7 Cups is happy to say, we're here for you. No matter who you are or what you're going through, this is a place where you'll be heard and cared for. We might be strangers on the surface, but underneath, we're just the friends you haven't met yet. 7 Cups has trained volunteer listeners available 24/7 to give emotional support over online chat. It's anonymous and, get this, completely free. When you need someone to talk to, we're here to listen and help you feel better. Learn more about 7 Cups today by visiting 7cups.com, or, as always, you can check out the show notes for the link. Yeah, okay.
I mean, to go with that, I guess I wish my mother was more forgiving. She still holds on to that grudge of me leaving her at the age of 18. But to me, I don't know why she's very closed as far as speaking about her life experiences to me. I don't know if she doesn't think I can handle it or it's too unbearable for her to relive again. Mm-hmm. But to me, I was just like, why do you care that I left when you had 3 other children in the Philippines and you left them and you haven't been back since? And then, you know, out of nowhere, my half-sister reached out to me and we got to talking, and that's when I found out that she was in an abusive relationship. So she came here, and I didn't know she overstayed her visa, and she had me. And that made me feel, you know, shitty. I'm just like, oh, you did a lot more than I thought you did, but I still can't get over the fact, like, you know, telling me some of these things, even though it's hard and it's probably scary or probably just insecure or just a shame. Like, I felt that one to help me grow as a woman as well. I hate the fact that history kind of had to repeat itself. And I was in an abusive relationship. I wish she wouldn't have told me about it, so I would have known the signs of what to look for in a relationship and what not to look for. I don't like the fact that me and her kind of share that, because it's not, you know, nobody should be in an abusive relationship. And for her to travel like thousands of miles and leave her 3 kids behind because of it, I just have so many questions still. And I'm just like, I don't know if she'll ever open up to me about it. And like I said, like in the beginning too, like if one person hears this and it makes them feel some type of way or gives them like an moment, then why not? And I wish she would do that with me. I'm her daughter. I'm not just any, you know, stranger out there. And it saddens me too that I feel like she's closed me off so much that like she hasn't even met my son yet.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I'm just like, I want her to see me now. I feel like she still sees me as that little girl. I feel like she doesn't know much about me right now. And I'm like, okay, I understand I left at 18, and that I've been through a lot since then. A lot of stuff that wasn't great. But look at me now. Like, I didn't turn out bad at all. Like, I got over the obstacles and roadblocks that life's thrown at me. Like, you know, as far as schooling, of course, like I know she wanted, and, you know, of course I made that decision to keep pursuing school. I'm doing that. Like, I was able to stand up on my 2 own feet and be independent by 18 and have, you know, a career and all that. And of course, like, I don't think I could have done that without her upbringing. So something sucks that she's taught me. And for that, I am grateful. But I wish she could just see that, like, okay, you know, put all the BS aside. Like, I raised a good daughter. So that kind of, like, hurts me, too. I don't know if it's just too much of, like, a culture, like, difference. Just being, I'm like, she's lived here long enough that, you know, she should have embraced the American culture by now. But I know just growing up, it was just all about Filipino culture. So I just don't know why or why not she's accepted that. But I'm like, if my son comes out like half the woman I came out to be, like, I would just be happy. I'd just be so proud. Like, you did it, you know, you're doing your thing, good job, you know, and give all that love. But I just feel like tables turn. I'm not getting that from her. And that's one thing I want to, you know, make sure I do with my son is, like, to always love him no matter what and to always be in his life no matter what. And no matter if we get into a fight or he does something that I don't like, life's too short. I can't, you know, he's part of me. He's my blood. So I wish my mom would think about it that way too. But I just feel like sometimes with Filipino culture, it's just like chin up, like I'm too proud to kind of like back down or whatever it may be. And I'm like, that's not right. Like, we're kids. Like, don't you miss us? Or, you know?
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah. It's totally a pride thing, like you said. I'm curious if you would be open or what your thoughts would be if you like called your mom and asked her to get involved with your son somehow, like maybe asking her to help teach him Tagalog or something like that, where you're expressing that, it's important to you that he connect with his culture and that you'd like her to be involved in that. I wonder if she would be receptive to that, because I just can't help but think that if you guys haven't, been on speaking terms recently or haven't seen each other in a while, and you want her to see, what success that you've been able to achieve and kind of this new place that you're in where you feel really good about your life and you want to share it with her, there's no better way than to show her that through, spending time with your son and having them connect as well.
Well, yeah, about that. So while I was pregnant still, my fiance was just like, let's go over there. And I was like, okay. But I wanted him to also see, like, I'm not being a bad person or a bad daughter, because a lot of people do think that about me or always tell me, like, but that's your mom. And I'm like, I understand that, but it's a two-way street. I can't do everything myself. So we were like, let's go over there, of course. And he's big on family. He's real close with his family, which I envy. And I'm grateful that I'm part of his family now, too. But we went over there. We brought the whole family, meaning our 2 dogs, too. And she didn't even let us inside. She kept us outside. And it lasted maybe 5 minutes of that. She didn't really ask him any questions. She was more interested in, like, our dogs. And like, my mom is kind of like a borderline hoarder, so I'm just like, okay, that's fine. But I'm like, there was a McDonald's across the street, or we can just went around the block and walk the dogs and talk. None of that happened. And after I gave birth, I think, I want to say my son was maybe like 2 to 3 months. I went back over there. I just saw her like peeking out the window, didn't answer the door. And then most recently, it was like about a week ago, we went over there because it just so happens the church that we're going to get married at is like a block away from where she lives. And She didn't answer the door. And the only reason I feel like she called me recently was just to tell me that my half-sister was going to call me. And that was it. Because before that, she stopped calling me on my birthdays like she usually would. So I'm just like, I'm trying. I just don't know what else to like do. And I had, before too, a couple years back, I told her too, I was like, why don't you just tell me like the real story about like my dad, straight up, and nothing. So I'm like, it's like pulling teeth, and it shouldn't be like pulling teeth, especially because I'm an adult now. So I don't know what it is, but she definitely feels more comfortable talking to my half sister because all this information that I found out recently is through her. And I'm like, I don't understand why you can't tell me. So I feel some type of way about that.
Yeah, for sure. That's valid. That's understandable. And I'm sorry that you've made those attempts and that's been her reaction. I know that it can be really frustrating. I mean, I think about some of the same conversations and interactions that I've had with my dad, and how he's in the same ways, just very much closed off and not receptive to it at all. But with him, at least, I've found that it helps when I'm a little bit more aggressive and a little bit like less apologetic about trying to step on his toes, and that, at least in his case, is sort of effective sometimes. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know if I would urge you to try that at this point with your mom, especially given like the bold attempts that you've made to even go by the house. And yeah, I'm sorry. That sucks.
It does, but everyone has different like family lifestyles, I guess. And
right.
I'm just, like I said, I'm just proud that I'm not stuck on that. I think about it, but it doesn't stay with me to a point where I can't function.
Right.
I'm kind of at just this point, like, okay, I respect her to a certain amount, of course. I wish we had a closer relationship, but I don't. But I'm just thankful for all the other women who've accepted me as like their daughter. Like I have work moms and obviously my mother-in-law. So to all the mother figures that I've had out there, thank you. So, but other than that, I'm just like, you know, at least I know that I tried. If I didn't try, then I think, you know, I would feel more bad. But since I know I am trying, she can't say that I didn't. So that kind of puts me at peace. But, you know, I won't stop. It won't be an everyday thing. But if I am around the area and, you know, kind of feel like doing that, then I will. But if not, then, you know, I have my family to think about now.
Yeah.
Right.
Maybe she just needs some time to like come around to the idea, whatever she's been telling herself in her own head, you know, the more that you make it a regular thing, maybe she'll eventually just let her guard down a little.
Right. And that's the thing too. I'm like, I don't know whatever story I get from her is the truth, because I feel like she's been hiding something from me for so long that I feel like she's convinced or curated a story in her head already that may not be the truth. So I'm just like, is it even worth trying to get the real story? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, that's tough.
You know, I feel like, and I don't know your mom, but I want to say, first of all, she sounds incredible in the highest respects. You know, the fact that she came here and she was a single parent and she raised you and she made sure to preserve, you know, Tagalog and the culture, you know, with you. And I can only imagine that pride is really a wall to cover whatever pain that she has. Like, I don't know. I'm totally just like guessing, but I imagine that. I even think for myself, when I get mad at my husband and I get prideful, it's because there's this pain that he triggered in me that I'm not comfortable talking about. And so I let it out like through anger and pride and maybe like pointing out his faults, you know? And so I can only imagine, like, it sounds like your mom has done so much that, and she's been so strong for you, that to even consider like telling her story would mean like showing a vulnerable part of her that she is not ready to do. And I think, like, you know, in past interviews, we talked about how sometimes maybe the reason why our parents aren't opening up to us is because, like, if they open up, it's like opening up trauma for them. And maybe they're just not ready for that. You know, maybe it probably might actually backfire to have them open up, you know, and maybe they're trying to, you know, protect whatever it is, whatever story they've told themselves to survive this long, that if they were to open up, like, they wouldn't be safe anymore. You know what I mean? And so that's like the only, like, based on just the interviews we've had so far. And like I said, I could totally be wrong about this, but I feel like if there's anything I've learned about pride, it's usually a way to cover up some form of pain.
Right. Yeah, I understand that. And I wish I can help relieve some of that pain if she were to open up, especially because we've been through the same thing at this point. And her anger, too, unfortunately, has passed down to me. So I'm more aware with that with my son. But I'm just like, when I heard, too, that she came from an abusive relationship, I'm just like, well, why did you bring down that abuse to me? Like I said, she was very strict. So it was more like, you couldn't go out anywhere. You couldn't sleep at your friend's house. Like, spankings, whoopings, like everything. Being half black, she didn't really accept that. And I'm like, how do you not accept that? Like, I'm your daughter. You kind of have to accept that.
Right.
You should have thought about that beforehand.
Yeah, you're like, so you made me remember.
Right, exactly. To say stuff like, which, of course, when I tell like other Filipinos, they totally get it. But to me, I'm just like, oh my God, my mom was like low-key racist, because she would be like, what's that hairstyle? That's braids. That's like black people hairstyle. And I'm like, yeah, I'm half black. Sorry.
Right.
Right. Or just like, don't stay out in the sun too long. You're going to get too dark. I'm not going to be able to see you. And I'm like, really?
Oh my
so just
God.
Stuff like that, I'm like, I don't understand. Like, I don't know. Like, I just feel like something should have clicked. Like, I don't want to be like how my husband treated me or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Or I feel like maybe she was still like brainwashed, because that is a hard thing to get rid of. And then now I actually have her husband's last name, so Santos. And I'm just like, why did you give me that last name? Like, he's not my biological father. To me, he looks like the devil now because of the stories that I heard. So I'm just like, I don't want this last name. And then I felt even worse because I was so adamant that I wanted like my son to have a part of me. And so he has it in his birth certificate like Santos. And I'm like, can I retract that? Like, I don't want to have this last name now, knowing that what he's capable of. So yeah, I'm just like, in my head, I'm like, Mom, like, why didn't you tell me all these things? You're going to help me out so much. Like, so much. You don't understand. Like, yeah, it's hard, but it's one of those things where it would have clicked with me, or I can help you. We can help each other if you would just have told me these things. And I didn't like that I'm hearing it from like a third party.
Yeah. Well, Meia, I just have to say, you know, just how much I admire you and applaud you for just how introspective you are, and how also caring and compassionate you are and thoughtful you are of your mom. I can only imagine that the things you maybe felt like you didn't get from your mom, it sounds like you have turned that around to be the change that you want to see, you know, with your little family and your son. And so I could tell that it has really inspired you, you know, to say the least, to be your best self. So, you know, if nothing else, that's what I see, is someone who is really caring, really thoughtful, really compassionate, you know, really cares about other people. And I want to thank you for sharing your story, you know, with your mom, and just being so transparent about these questions that you have of her. I think it's very common that a lot of us have this imperfect relationship with our parents, and we just wish that there was some bridge that we can meet at and just be like, hey, let's do this together. Like, why do we have to do this whole hierarchy thing? Why do you have to be prideful? Why, right? And it's like, why does it have to be? But until we figure out that answer, if we ever, it sounds like you have kind of found your own peace and be like, yeah, I mean, my mom's my mom. And I'm going to be me. Like, I'm going to be all that I am. I'm going to do my hair the way that I want. I'm going to raise my family the way that I want. And I just want to thank you for giving birth to me and showing me the traits that, you know, showing me an example of what a strong mother looks like and how I could apply that now as a mother. So kudos to you, Meia. Just want to let you know that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I see all that and I hear all of that. And so I thank you for sharing all of that. I want to go ahead, speaking of sharing all of that, let's go ahead and transition to really the final question of this interview. And it's sharing the reason why this show exists is because we want to be able to publish a book where it'll have a collection of life lessons and stories told by Filipino American women. And so for you, Meia, you have a side tattoo that I'd love for you to talk about. And your tattoo, and actually, why don't we talk about it? Because I don't know how to pronounce this part. So like, which is an alibada, I think. But why don't we talk a little bit about this tattoo that you want to share today and what it stands for and why you chose to get that tattoo?
So I got the tattoo just because actually it was from a paper I was writing in high school, and one of my teachers wrote it underneath and was like, if you do what you've always done, you'll get where you've always gotten. And that resonated with me because I feel like people are just like kind of stuck in their ways. And if you keep repeating your ways, you're going to more than likely get the same results. And I got that in Alibata, which is also called Babayan alphabet, which is the ancient script of like the Tagalog people. And just again to kind of have more of my culture with me by having it written that way, and just like a everyday reminder. Being in bad relationships, I kind of just gave up on, you know, having a family or having someone to love me. And I'm just like, why? Like, everyone around me is not having a hard time, like, finding this great guy, but I am. And it was just, I was picking all the wrong men, you know? Of course, like, I didn't know what a good relationship was. And that, of course, goes back to my mom. But so I kind of just had to accept, like, okay, however my life goes, if I'm meant to be single or whatever, I'm going to be fine with that and just keep doing what I have to do in my life to be happy. And then I gave the nice guy a chance, and here I am. So it was just like, you know, how can I change my life to be different? So it was just like taking those steps. And like, I was a nursing assistant for 10 years, and I'm like, I needed a change. And from there, just working different jobs. And now I'm like, now I know what I want to go back to school for. So just switching it up. If you're not seeing the results that you want in life, you know, you got to think to yourself at one point, like, maybe it's me. Maybe there's something that I'm doing or not doing where I'm not seeing the results that I want, or the reason that I'm not happy right now, because who else is going to be in control of your life? You. So if you see something you don't like, or you're feeling something you don't like, you have to change it. And for me, it took getting a tattoo to realize that.
There you go. Just solidify. It's like, you know what? Like, so I don't forget.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. I don't have a tattoo, but I know if I get a tattoo, I know what it's going to say. And it's going to be very meaningful. One, because it's probably going to be painful to have a tattoo. But two, because I thought long and hard about the fact that I was going to go through this pain to have this tattoo on my body. So yeah, I don't think people put tattoos on themselves on accident, although I'm sure they do sometimes. But I love that your tattoo is very well thought out, and it's a representation of who you are and in honor of your culture. I also like the saying itself, you know, if you do what you have always done, you'll get what you've always gotten. And I think it's just kind of a testament to like who you are and what you've gone through in life. You know, you didn't let these questions you have around your mom stop you from living your life. You know, you're like, if I keep asking these questions, I'm not getting answers, then I can't live my life trying to get these answers. I need to move on from that. I need to live my life. And who knows, maybe the answers will come. But there's also that saying that the definition of insanity is doing things over and over again, expecting a different result. And so I just think I just really like the quote that you have chosen. And it's just a good reminder that, yeah, sometimes you got to switch it up if you don't like your situation. And sometimes,
I think that I share a lot of your experience, your romantic experience in the way that you've described your past. And I like the way that you've just taken such responsibility for your own happiness and creating that for yourself. And like you said, gave the nice guy a chance.
Right.
And yeah, I totally relate to that. So I get what you mean by that. And I know exactly kind of that puts into context for me, you know, your story. And that's really cool. So congratulations on finding that. And again, creating that for yourself and kind of taking the reins and, you know, getting what you want, going after what you want instead of just expecting it to find you.
Right.
Beautiful. Well said. Well, Meia, this was an incredible conversation today. I want to thank you again just for your openness and your willingness to share your story and talk about your relationship with your mom. And more importantly, just talk about how you're owning it with life and your career and your family and being a mother and just everything. So I want to thank you so much for that. For people that are interested in possibly reaching out to you or learning more about you, how could they do that? How could they find you online?
You can find me on Instagram and Facebook at foodraiseme.com.
Cool. Yes. And I actually checked out your Instagram account earlier this week and I was like, food. I love food. It's just
amazing.
Thank you.
I was like, yes. I feel like the name is self-explanatory. Food raised me, but I do want to kind of get your reason as to why you chose the username Food Raised Me.
Just because, of course, I love food And I feel like one way to really get to know a culture is through their food. And so I was just like, food raised me. And that was one of the things too. Like, my mom always cooked. No matter how many hours she worked at work, she always came home and cooked. And while I didn't necessarily like stand by her and watch her, like that's what I do now too. Like, I'm always cooking, and my in-laws love me for that.
There you go. Love it. Awesome, Meia. Well, once again, I want to thank you so much for your time. And Nani, I want to thank you for co-hosting as always. To our listeners, if you did not get that IG handle, Food Raise Me, I mean, it sounds pretty easy, but in case you didn't get it, that's going to be in the show notes because you know how generous I am with those. I provide that all the time. You're welcome, as always. With that said, we want to thank you all for being here today. And we hope that you have gained another lesson that you could apply in your life. And thank you all for listening, and we look forward to speaking with you again in the next episode. Tune in next time.
Thank you all. Bye, Meia.
Bye, you guys. Thank you so much. And this is an amazing platform. I'm so glad I got to share my story.